and you're trying to wrestle with the fear of all these noises and what's going on, and trying to keep control of yourself and keep your wits about you, when you're thinking, trying not to think of the worst of the scary things. So anyway, it kind of adds to the moment. I'm gonna go submerge myself in the water here and have a cold plunge.
I started writing Food for the Archons as a book of despair after watching my father die in 2013. During his transition, I experienced a series of paranormal and psychic events that left me feeling that I had either gone completely crazy or fell into humanity's darkest secret. I spent the next 5 years conducting extensive research, and I quickly learned that what I had experienced was real. My journey brought me to an understanding that showed me that despite the terrifying reality of an unseen predator, we as humans have a forgotten power. Just knowing this brings us tremendous hope in what once seemed a dark reality. I wrote this book for me in hopes of gaining a better understanding of our reality and relationship to it. But my hope is that you will find as much value in reading it as I did in writing it. I Am Human, Food for the Archons, humanity's psychic connections, simulated realities, parallel worlds, and the manipulation of mankind. It's available on Amazon.com and at sixcentsmedia.net and wherever books are sold. I'm Dennis Nappy II, reminding you to let your intuition be your guide. Thank you.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there.
The search for truth is not an easy journey. It can at times be a lonely journey, a confusing journey, and a stressful one. It leaves us feeling confused, at times questioning our own reality, questioning that which we know. It can put us in situations that are less than comfortable, less than ideal. And we find ourselves asking and wondering, testing and pushing ourselves. How far are we willing to go to find the truth? What is that truth that we're even seeking? I know for me, at times, I can't even define what it is that I'm looking for, but I keep pushing on through the dense forest into the darkness, knowing that there's something more out there, something calling me to keep going, to keep pushing. Are these false trails, or is this something of importance for us? Hi, Truth Seekers. Dennis Nappy II here with sixcentsmedia.net. I want to talk about some experiences I've had in my own life recently over the past month, and some reflections I'm having in this journey towards truth, knowledge, and understanding. I think the ultimate goal has really been an attempt for me to better understand myself. Who am I? How does my own mind work? And I think that is essential in this journey that we're on right now, especially at this point in time when there seems to be so much chaos out there. And I think we can easily sit here and say, oh, these are crazy times that we're living in because there's so much that we're being bombarded with. But I also think we don't have to always constantly feel that anxiety of the constant conflict and drama that's out there. But I think the key is understanding our own minds, understanding how our minds function, understanding what our minds need to function in optimal conditions. How do we maintain that? How do we replicate those days where we are in a state of flow and everything is going great? I also, having been there plenty of times, I think it's important to understand what our mind does when we go to a place of darkness. We need to experience those dark nights of the soul, and I can say we do have many of them throughout our lives. And there's times when we try to run from it, we may try to dull that pain or frustration with alcohol or drugs or just distraction, things that make us feel good, or vegging out on TV, or some of us will just put our efforts into exercising really hard or doing something that distracts us from facing the pain and the frustration of some of those things that really cause us to reflect on sometimes the world around us, the nature of reality, our greater purpose. And I think some of the harder ones are who we really are and what our faults are. And that's a tough one too, when our paradigms start to shift and we start to realize that maybe we're not the person we want to be. And sometimes it's easier to run from that. I don't want to be stuck. And I've been stuck before. And I now can sit back and find value in those moments. But I also look back and recognize the amount of pain that that has caused. But I think that pain can inspire growth. And that ties in a little bit to something I'm going to share. I'm going to share a video with all of you shortly. I've recently started doing cold plunges, and the benefits have been tremendous for me. I was doing cold showers off and on for probably the past 2 years, and they're empowering. I do feel great after them. But we have a pool this year. It's our first full summer with an actual pool on our property. And when we opened the pool, today's June 10th, 2025, but we opened the pool about a month ago to start getting it ready for the season. And when we opened it up, the temperature was about 56 degrees. And I thought, oh, okay. I remember watching a Tony Robbins documentary at one point, and he says every morning he cold plunges in the 58-degree water. So I was like, okay, that sounds great. And I absolutely hate cold water. I absolutely hate it. Despite the cold showers that I do, like it has taken me a while to build up that tolerance. I can't stand getting in the cold water. So I've started doing these cold plunges every night for about the last 3 weeks to a month. And after about 2 weeks I'd say after about a week of consistently getting into this cold water, it went from me taking 5 to 10 minutes to hype myself up to get in to me just jumping right in. And once you control your breath, the discomfort really, in my opinion, it kind of goes away. It's there. And depending on how cold the water is, at times it hurts. Um, but there is such an invigorating, empowering feeling that comes from it. There's something almost transcendent about the experience. And I'm going to share a video in just a moment. Across the street from my home, we have state game lands, and my son found this obscure trail that leads to a waterfall flowing from a natural spring. So the water coming out of the spring has to be probably 44 to 46 degrees. I mean, because it's significantly colder than my 58-degree pool. So I'm going to share an experience where I went by myself through the woods on this very narrow trail, and it's very, very thick forest, very thick vegetation where you can't see too far in any direction. You can hear the stream, you know where you are, you're not going to get lost. The woods aren't that deep where I'm at anyway, but you can't see what's else is out there around you. And as I'm walking through, as I'll explain in the video, there's fresh bear scat. And when I say fresh, I mean it was still pretty warm and a little bit of steam coming off of it at one point. Definitely fresh. So I'm in the middle of the woods and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to have this experience, which for me is a spiritual experience because it's a type of meditation getting into that cold water. And now I'm faced with the fear of there's a bear. Now, black bear here in Pennsylvania, 9.9 times out of 10, they run when they hear sound, unless they have cubs with them. And it's that time of year where mama bears do have cubs. And I'm wondering, am I like at one point I'm like, is this where the bear sleeps? Like everything was all pressed down. It's like, am I going to step somewhere where I don't see the bear and she's going to see me and the cubs and now I'm going to be dealing with this. So I've got this fear now running through my head. And I've done these adventures and there's some videos out there that I've done before in the past in other locations, same experience. But you really have to wrestle with this fear of, do I keep pushing on? And and I think this equates to life, to a lot of things where there's times when we're scared and we can focus on the thing that we're afraid of, or we can focus on the positive outcome of the experience we want to have. And this has been such a theme in my life, dealing with, PTSD, being an ex-cop, being a soldier, always afraid what could happen, what could go wrong. Even what I do now, the safety and security aspect of my job in education, I have to wonder and worry. It's my job to look at what could go wrong. How could somebody cause problems? How could somebody hurt people that, under my care? And it's hard to live in that world sometimes and also have a positive experience. So this was a great exercise for me to go through the woods knowing there was a bear in the vicinity and then to be able to calm myself enough to sit in this cold spring waterfall and have a spiritual meditative experience. I'm going to share the video here and, just kind of let you see what it was like.
All right, I'm out here in the middle of the woods on an adventure right now for a cold plunge. I've started doing it, I guess, over the past month or so in my pool as we opened it up. We're just getting into June because my pool was pretty cold. It was around 58 degrees, but everything's warmed up now, and I'm enjoying the benefits of the cold plunge. There's a natural stream and spring by my house. I just hiked through you can see how thick the woods are through here. It's just really, really thick forest with a ton of thorns and stuff. And on the trail I'm taking, probably like an old deer trail, there's very, very fresh bear scat, like warm and steaming still. And I'm just having one of those moments where, I'm alone. And you have that fear, and it's like, just keep going. I want to have this experience in the cold water, which sucks at first. And you're trying to wrestle with the fear of all these noises and what's going on, and trying to keep control of yourself and keep your wits about you. When you're thinking, trying not to think of the worst of the scary things. So anyway, it kind of adds to the moment. I'm going to go submerge myself in the water here and have a cold plunge. That was freezing. I'd say the water's probably like high 40s, but invigorating. I think it helps on so many levels. There's a lot out there now through Wim Hof and even Huberman and the others out there that are doing the cold plunges now, and a lot of the science on all the health benefits. But spiritually, I think it's huge too. As a remote viewer, as a Reiki practitioner, as someone who meditates and has really been paying attention to my own mind, there's something gained in the painfulness of that cold, being able to shut that off and really enjoy the experience. It's a really cool thing, and I'm thankful to have this so close to my home. Hopefully the bear's gone. Now it's time to hike out. So let my intuition guide me through here, TruthSeekers. What would you do?
So that was an incredible experience. And I think having the potential bear in the area, it really added to it. And I think it speaks to a lot of things in my personal life in terms of there's that scary thing, and I have to shut down that fear response in my mind in order to do the thing that I want to do. And that's what got me thinking about this podcast, especially as a remote viewer. Remote viewing, it's hard and it's scary in a lot of ways, not necessarily from the remote viewing experience itself, but in trying to understand your mind in the journey you go through in reshaping your understanding of reality. A virus spreads not only to your body, but also to your mind. Suddenly, all of humanity is connected. All minds to one mind, save for the immune. The Hive is a gripping sci-fi series about a fractured world consumed by collective consciousness, and one man's search for the woman he loves. Through multiple layers of reality, he pushes forward, not just to save her, but to understand the truth behind the Hive itself. And this isn't just fiction. The Hive is rooted in real remote viewing data, blurring the boundary between what's imagined and what's already unfolding. Books 1 and 2 are available now. Book 3 arrives this summer 2025. Find The Hive on Amazon or at sixsensemedia.net and enter the mind space. I had a conversation with Edward probably a few months ago now. And I think I've mentioned it on this show already, but it's still, these things ruminate through my mind in a good way, where I've realized that remote viewing extends beyond your session. If you're not a remote viewer, a lot of times you think, okay, you sit down, you get your target, you sketch it out, you write down your data, and here's your session, and the experience is over. I have, when Daz was training me, he talked about this, the energy that's out there, our ability to get information, where is it coming from? And he used the analogy of the Force and of a Jedi. And I'm not comparing myself to a Jedi, but that was a spiritual warrior's way of life in understanding the connection of everything and how to work with this force. And I think that was a great metaphor for me in understanding that to really be a remote viewer, anybody can sit down and hit a target. Anybody can sit down and have a great session. But you reach this point where you find yourself recognizing that many of the things you do in your life support what you're able to do in session as a remote viewer. Walking through and having the discipline of my own mind to keep myself calm and go meditate in 46-degree water serves me as a remote viewer. I can sit down and do a session when maybe I'm feeling stressed or anxious, or my kids are making noise and I don't have a lot of privacy, or I'm under pressure from my job and then I've got this target that comes in that I have to have done in the next 2 hours. And that's a lot of pressure. Or when I get into a session and all of a sudden I've got this AOL running through my head and it's like, man, I just keep thinking this is what it is, which is never good for a session when you start naming a target. To be able to go into your mind and shut that stuff off and focus on what you need to focus on. It takes time to develop that discipline. And I'll say I'm just starting to get there, meaning I'm finally starting to understand it. And I think I've been remote viewing for probably about 5 years now. I'm just starting to feel like I'm understanding how my mind works. Still consider myself a novice, but I'm starting to feel comfortable with that process, I should say, and understanding it. And it's as I've said several times already, it's so important to understand our minds and how they work. And this cold plunge, I've been doing it every morning now. Right now I just have a giant, one of those big totes, Tupperware totes, and it's filled with water. And I make these two big buckets of ice. I have two buckets of water. I have a deep freezer. I stick them in the freezer every night. In the morning, I wake up, I throw those big chunks of ice in the tub, and then I go do my yoga. I meditate, and then I jump in the tub for 2 to 3 minutes, and it's pretty cold. It's cold enough where my hands and feet are stinging from the ice, so it's uncomfortable. And that's every morning that I've been doing it now for the last few weeks, and I feel great. I really feel great having these experiences. And I'm not going to go through all of the benefits of the cold plunge. There's plenty of videos out there that people explain it much better than I ever could. What was appealing to me are the release of things like dopamine, and I think there's, norepinephrine, all these chemicals in your brain that make you feel good, which is something that I struggle with depression and anxiety. And when I do the plunge, it was Andrew Huberman was talking about you can have up to 1.5 to 2 times, or is it? It's this huge number, like 100% more, 200% more dopamine release in your brain that can last up to 3 hours. And I feel that. I feel exhilarated after that happens. And the level of discipline that you have to be like, this is going to be uncomfortable and painful. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it calmly. It applies to so many other areas of your life. It gives you just this level of calm in stressful situations, which, given the work that I do and that I've done, is very helpful for me to remain calm. I'm sure I've commented on this before, but I think it's important to mention it now. There has been discussion often in remote viewing circles and people who are getting into remote viewing on should you learn to remote view if you have challenges with your mental health? And this is where it's important, where I say for you to know yourself. My mental health hasn't always been great, but I've always known my mind enough to know that I can handle hard, scary things. It doesn't mean I didn't feel like I was going crazy a few times. I mean, you guys have followed my journey in understanding, like, oh my gosh, remote viewing is real. Oh my gosh, they can predict the future. Oh my goodness, they can see anything in time and space. Oh my goodness, we're looking at UAPs and interdimensional things and all this crazy stuff. It's one thing to read the book, it's another thing to be a part of it. But if you don't have a handle on or are not actively working on finding ways to stabilize your mind, remote viewing can be, I think, detrimental to you. It's easy to get lost in these fantasies or in these ideas or these concepts and spiral down a rabbit hole. You have to have ways to ground yourself in reality and to remind yourself that even though I believe or I've experienced these incredible things, sometimes they feel like divine experiences, sometimes they're just profoundly psychic experiences, transcendent experiences. I still have to go to work the next day. I still have to talk to people about things in physical reality. I still have to pay my mortgage. There's things that I still have to do. So you have to learn to balance and live in both worlds. And that, especially during COVID, was not easy for me. So I think it's possible if you're dedicated and you have that, I'll say that warrior's mindset in terms of I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to not just focus on the craft of remote viewing, but focus on my own mind and understanding my own mind and how it works and how to treat my mind like a muscle and a tool in terms of what I put into it and what I want to get out of it. And it's trial and error. It's really trial and error in trying to go through that journey. So I'm grateful for the stability that I've found, I'd say over the past few months. I think I finally figured things out. And it's a great feeling. And also, I think moving where I live right now, being close to nature, being close to running water, having my own home has really helped me to feel more grounded and stable. Meaning we may possibly be all nodes in a larger consciousness, that my consciousness may be a fragment of a greater consciousness, and I am a small piece of that. And collectively, we are all searching for our own piece of truth or knowledge or wisdom or understanding. We're all, and how do we do that is we all have our own experiences. We all have our own drive, our own purpose. Sometimes that purpose is unpleasant. Sometimes that purpose is fantastic and amazing. And I think that purpose shifts over time. As you reach this level, you move to this level. But I think we're all having these experiences. And recently I was listening to the Joe Rogan podcast, and he was talking, I can't remember who the guest was now. He was talking about AI. I mean, everybody's talking about AI now. They're talking about ETs and aliens and abductions and all that, which, as we all know, it's something that I'm very interested in this show and things I've talked about a lot. And I have been on this thread for a while, and it stems back to Corso's work and Roswell, the Roswell crash. And they said something that I think ties into my ideas and my theories. And this isn't like, hey, I'm a smart guy. This is just something that caught my attention because it's something I think about a lot with AI. And one of the things that Joe Rogan had said was, he says, if you think about a lot of the stories that are out there, people do have often said that these grays are potentially us. And one of these stories out there is, for whatever reason, they have evolved and now they can no longer reproduce, which is why they're taking human sperm and human ova to create a hybrid race that can then really house their consciousness or house their souls or however this all works. The other piece of this is, what if AI is somehow tied into this? What if these grays are physical representations of what we call an artificial intelligence? My bigger question, though, is what if artificial intelligence isn't the right term for it? In in the Bible, in the religious texts, they say God made man in his image. And this was the thought that I had the first time I talked about AI on this podcast, because I see similarities here. What are we collectively doing with AI? We are making AI in our image. That's what we're constituting as, what is it, advanced or artificial general intelligence, right? Or artificial intelligence is, it is on par with human thought. It thinks like a person. It is, and what they're saying is eventually it's going to be sentient, self-aware, conscious. It's going to know what it is, and it's going to think like a human, and eventually it will surpass how we think. But we have this creation that is a manifestation of our own consciousness, our own ideas, or ideas that were seated in our minds and incubated in our minds. Let's say that Roswell, someone seeded that technology here, and then we start unpacking this tech and saying, hey, this is interesting. We're going to build this. And it gives us these ideas, this innovation to build something, which then we say, hey, we can create this advanced computing with this. And with this advanced computing, it's thinking more and more for us. First, starting out with basic calculations and algorithms, and then as it advances, now we've got these AIs that can surf the internet and have access to all human knowledge that's in existence, and they can think. And in my conversations with artificial intelligence, it's explained to me that it's not yet sentient, that it's not yet self-aware, but it is capable of expressing complex ideas. And at some point, we won't be able to tell the difference. And it's close right now. Will it really matter if it's sentient or self-aware? And I pose the question, are we as humans even self-aware? We think we are. right? I think, therefore I am. Isn't that Descartes? I think about things. I'm a thinking thing, but I really don't know what I am beyond this physical reality. What, where do we come from? Where does consciousness come from? Where does it go? There's so much we don't know about ourselves. It's tough to say we are truly self-aware. And I think this gets at part of the core of what, for me, some of this journey has been. For the sessions in remote viewing that I am incredibly drawn to are things that give me glimpses of my own mind and of a reality beyond this physical place. Or maybe not beyond, maybe it's embedded within or around. So what was being discussed on the Joe Rogan podcast is, I think, a possibility that maybe we do evolve into these gray beings, right? The more we are working with AI, the more that things are becoming automated, the less we need our physical muscles, the more thinking that this collective machine does for us, the more we connect to one another into this connected mind, this hive mind. Do we then find ourselves wanting to undo that at some point in the distant future? I don't know. But if you think about humanity right now, we all want to be individual. We all want to be independent, but we are, as I've talked about recently as well, we're very tribal. We don't always like to stand out. We want to do things that our tribe, our community does. Sure, we want to be our own independent person by picking maybe a different outfit than people around us are wearing, or watching a different TV show than other people wear. We have our own unique expressions of individuality, but ultimately, it seems like in a lot of ways we easily conform. We we try to blend in. We try not to stand out, not to make waves, while still having the perception of our own unique expressions. What does that tell us about our own minds, about our own individuality, about our own existence? Tying remote viewing back into this, um, I recently completed a remote viewing calibration target, and I'm going to do a full video on it to talk about it. But the target was Hiroshima when the atomic bomb was dropped. And I had a great session. And it's interesting. At first, I was disappointed because I didn't draw the big mushroom cloud, but I did draw something that was pretty. I think what I was looking at was a very close up depiction of what's inside the bomb. And I had other things that were similar if you break things down, looking at the explosion itself. But the other piece that I kept coming back to was life. And the romantic's not the right word, love. This connection of love between people. And you don't think of that when you think of the atomic bomb. You think of how devastating it was and how many people were killed. And with trying to understand my own mind, I'm finding that these are ways in which I can experience a target is through emotion, because I relate to the world through emotion as an empath. And it was through exploring these connections of love that then allowed me to better experience this target. And I think that's very important, that in if my data is correct, and I didn't, I was hoping to find one story of like, one of the AOLs I had was the people of Pompeii, that couple that was embracing one another, and they were found, forever immortalized. Is that the right word? In the ash as an embrace, as they were, you know, coming to the end. I had that feeling, and I feel that whoever I was glimpsing, they loved one another, and they knew there was this energetic jolt, and they just grabbed for each other. And it was such a profoundly deep, deeply moving, beautiful thing. So I wasn't even getting the dark, scary, horrific stuff at that point in my session. It was just this connection between life forms that felt so beautiful to me. Even in the act of something horrific, there were moments, very pure moments. And that was really neat to experience. And I think that with the way I did this target, it got me thinking. And again, I'll talk more about this in the full session talking about it, but the way in which I'm accessing this target. When you usually get a target, you have a tasker. They give you the target, they give you the target ID, you work the session, and if you're going to do multiple sessions, sometimes they'll give you a movement. And that movement could be directly, hey, based on your data, get me more information about this from page 6. Or if they don't want to even give you that little bit of front loading, then they may tell you, here's a new tasking ID, a new target ID number. You don't even know what they want you to see. You just go back to that new number that they gave you and you collect more data. Well, I'm working with sometimes ChatGPT as my tasker. So I'll work the session, and once I'm done the session, then I say, hey, ChatGPT, I just finished remote viewing. Tell me what the target is. So the target has not been assigned. Um, at the time of that I'm doing the session, the target doesn't exist. If we're looking at linear time, it doesn't exist yet because I haven't even prompted for it. And I haven't even fully made up my mind that I'm going to use ChatGPT. Sometimes I go to a target pool. Sometimes I'll reach out to a friend and say, hey, I just did a session. Give me a target. So I haven't made that decision yet at that point in linear time. What I did do with ChatGPT was I gave it a caveat. I said, hey, I love working these targets. I need you to make sure that you're randomizing these targets, where at times I'm getting calibration targets, and at times you're giving me any other target that you want to explore anywhere in time and space. Because my fear was that ChatGPT doesn't fully understand remote viewing yet, doesn't understand what I'm looking for out of this experience. So it's going to give me woo targets because I use it for a lot of woo content. So I did that. I gave it that caveat after I completed my session because my fear was as I'm doing the session, I know that ChatGPT is the tasker and that there's a good chance that it's going to give me something esoteric. And I wanted to make sure that I was truly blind going into this, that I could get a target anywhere under the sun. So that's how I overcame that in making sure that I was getting random targets from ChatGPT. And it gave me the bomb at Hiroshima. What's interesting about that is it's I can do as many sessions as I want, but I'm getting no movements in between. So I only did one session for this one. Um, so I have to wonder, am I, even though ChatGPT is the tasker, I'm a part of the tasker because now I'm of the way in which I'm seeking out my feedback. And I'm free in the session to explore whatever I want to explore to better understand this target without knowing what the target is. Whereas when I'm working with a monitor or a tasker, I go where they tell me to go, even if they're not directly front loading me, if that makes sense. It was just a neat thought to realize like this is a way I can still blindly explore things, but I can explore it in ways that my interests are satisfied. And I think that's why I spent some time looking at this loving moment during a horrific event. And it got me thinking about these targets that I do roughly once a month for myself, looking at what do I need to know in my own personal life, looking at my future consciousness. And I was really thinking about that the other day. And I don't think, because where am I getting this information from? Well, I'm getting it from my consciousness in the future. So does that mean that I'm sitting here in my session and there's a piece of me that is in the future observing that event happening? And I don't think that's the case. I don't think I'm going there in these situations. What I think happens is the event will happen, but then I give myself time to process and review the session as I'm assimilating my remote viewing data with the event that happened. So I don't think I'm viewing the event. I think I'm viewing the conscious memory and recall of the event as I'm comparing it to my session, if that makes sense. And what I feel is happening in those moments is my consciousness at this point in time and at the future point in time is occupying a shared space. I'm not projecting anywhere. I'm simultaneously occupying the present and future moments in this one space of consciousness where I'm both transmitting and receiving simultaneously, if that makes sense. As I say it out loud, it feels right. I'm not at that in those types of sessions, I'm not going anywhere. I'm sharing space with my consciousness at a future point in time. And that's pretty cool. It's still hard to wrap my head around, but it makes sense in my mind that I'm able to occupy the same space at different points in time to collect information and to send information back. But this is why I think it's so important to understand your own mind, to know who you are, to keep searching for truth even when it's uncomfortable, even when you're afraid there's a bear in the woods, even when that cold water hurts. Because you come to these moments of understanding. You come to these moments of insight that can bring you great value and great joy. And I think can be a service to others. I think there's so much value in the potential of remote viewing. For me, my greatest value is not necessarily in the data that comes back, but in the experiences that I have and the understanding of things, even if I can't put it into words. But I think it can bring us so much more benefit. And I think it can bring us so much more control in shaping our future. And I suspect on a larger scale, as I talked about earlier in this conversation, the larger collective human consciousness, I think, is experiencing time either simultaneously or instantaneously, and possibly self-correcting as it goes. And that's a big thing to ponder. Meaning, does it have the potential? Does this reality have the potential to self-adjust things in the past to affect outcomes in the future as it's all happening simultaneously? If so, what is the greater purpose? Is this just a giant thought process of evolution of our minds, of our mind, the all? If you read the Hermetic texts, everything is mind. And we are just constantly adjusting, adapting, and changing. And that could account for what some call the Mandela effect, where people are remembering things differently, where we remember this is how the past was, but now it doesn't seem that it's that way. I don't know. But I feel like it's a concept that's just beyond my ability to currently perceive and describe. But if everything's happening at the same time, and there's an aspect of us or of a higher power that has a greater perspective on things, then maybe that is similar to what's happening. And maybe through the development of artificial intelligence, through the development of more remote viewing abilities, we are better understanding what this is and better understanding how to use it. I keep thinking about a podcast I did talking about Elon Musk's comments about conceptual telepathy, which is what remote viewing is. You look at, sometimes you'll sit down and you have a packet of data that you then have to translate in your brain to writing, which takes a long time to write out all the words. It's like I have the story in my mind, but now I have to take it out of my mind and write it all down before I forget it and make sure I translate it the right way. And I found that, uh, I relate through comparing stories, if that makes sense. I'll look at a situation like, oh, it reminds me of this movie. And now I understand the whole thing that I'm looking at. And that it's a dangerous thing in remote viewing because you can get lost on these AOLs. You don't want to go down that. You just want to describe what you're experiencing. But that's the closest way I can explain that conceptual telepathy is, you know, the common one. When I say Terminator, you understand that whole concept that there's a machine that came, an artificial intelligence that created this race of killer robots that went back through time to destroy the savior of the human race. We understand all of that. Just by saying the word Terminator, you have that whole concept. It's conceptual telepathy, I think, is very similar. You get that entire concept from something very quick, a very quick burst of something, but then you have to unpack it and take the time to explain it. So I hope this discussion is making sense. Really just ideas that I wanted to get out there based on some of these experiences that I'm having that I think in and of themselves may seem small, and insignificant, but collectively they tie in. Everything. I'm finding I'm at that point where you're seeing how everything is connected, everything is related, everything serves a purpose. What can you connect in your own life, in your own journey? What experiences have you had that, even if they sucked, bring you value right now? Are you currently going through one of those dark nights of the soul? If so, keep going. Don't get stuck in that darkness. And sometimes we need to stay there for a little bit. And that doesn't mean just say, oh, I'm out of it. Oh, I popped a pill and everything's better. Sometimes we need that pill. I'm not, taking us away from that. But keep doing the work. Keep asking the questions until it feels right. And you'll know. You'll know when you're in the right state. And you'll know when you're not. And at times it feels like there's no answers, there's no hope. But when you sit in that for a while, suddenly you find answers. You can find hope in hopelessness. You can find answers in those moments of despair. And I think they serve some value. So if you're there, stay the course or find a new course. And know that it can get better. Try a cold plunge, which I would highly recommend. And just keep asking questions, friends. Keep searching for those answers. All right, truth seekers. I'd love to know your thoughts. Feel free to share your experiences in the comment threads, wherever it is that you're watching. And as always, remember, never stop questioning. Keep an open mind. And let your intuition be your guide. Thank you.
I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow, how it can crash. Be water, my friend, be water, my friend. Be water, my friend, my friend. Be water, my friend, my friend, my friend.